All right, let's say the bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan haTorah. Amen. Please be seated. If you guys don't mind, I'm just gonna pray quickly. For those of you who want to stand, you're welcome to. For those of you who don't want to stand. All right, let's just bow our heads. Father, we just want to thank you for this time as family. Thank you we can come and study your word. Father, I just pray that you would just continue to guide us through this, Lord Father, that I pray that we would hear from you and not from me. Father, I pray that you would just be with those that are here and be with those that are not. Father, as we sit in difficult situations, some of us dealing with emotions and difficulties, Father, I just pray that you meet us at our need. Please continue to strengthen us. Please continue to guide us. Please continue to protect us. And Father, I pray that you would just cover us completely, Father, that you would also go out before us and come in behind us. Father, in this time of transition, we continue to trust in you, Father, that your will is done. That you strengthen us, and for those who need to step up, I pray that they step up. For those that need to fall in line and follow, I pray that we do. And Father, I just pray that you prepare the way. We just give you glory. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen. Amen. All right. All right. Billy did a really nice job taking you guys through a build-up and to bring you into a couple of chapters, helping you understand a little bit more of, again, reminding you of the context and the background to try and lay up chapter 20. So I'm gonna, well, shall we ask? One thing that you guys remember about last week's, one thing that stuck out. This is where you look at your notes maybe, or you pretend like you paid attention. Just one thing. You don't have to give me a complete recap of the chapter. One thing that stuck out for you. It was in the Bible, yes, very good. Where else? What else? Yes, the teacher. Please tell me what stuck out for you.
The stone of departure.
Okay.
The grace that even though he needs to leave, but God is with him and there's going to be grace, and just the fact that sometimes in our toughest moments we feel like God is not there, we feel like we're under pressure, and what am I doing here? God gave me a promise, but everything is going against me. What's going on? So just that reminder that I'm with you, just as I was with Noah, just as we've made this covenant, and we found grace in Jonathan's eyes. The one guy who was supposed to take his place. But
yeah, it's an important one, eh? And I think it's quite pertinent to where we are at this point. Remember, just when you stick out and you step out to do God's will, doesn't mean that everything's going to be running smoothly. The enemy is going to try and let me just talk to the congregation now for a little bit. In the midst of that what we saw with David, right? His toughest times were into the lead up of God lifting him up, and will continue on until God cements him in place, right? And that time of transition is normally very, very difficult for a lot of us, because we struggle with the promises given and the fulfillment of those promises. Where do I get to become and walk out and live out those promises? Now, that is not only difficult for David, it's difficult for Jonathan, who wants to follow David as David is king. It's difficult for those who know that David is king. And it's difficult for a nation, because now they're fighting against one of their, I can't even say unsung heroes, because he was well praised. And they were like, but this is David. Why are we going up against him? And now all of a sudden there's this tension within the tribes. Benjamin is standing firm because one of our own is sitting on the throne. Now you want to give it to Judah? Are we going to lose our royal privileges? Are we going to lose maybe our bragging rights? And Judah is stepping up and it's like, but this is the guy. We see this is the guy and he's from our lineage. But remember, all of this is playing out. All the emotion, all the difficulty, all the tension. And in the midst of it, God is just allowing these things to happen so that the lessons that need to be learned are being taught. And remember, he's dealing with people. If you had to see this play out on a stage in front of you, you would look and you would go, but he's the king. Why can't the king see that he's the king? Why can't he take ownership of the fact that he made mistakes? And David should rightfully be stepped up. Why can't Saul and Jonathan both come under David? David would treat him well. And say, listen, you know, I've had my shot. I messed up. I made a mistake. David, it's your turn. Learn from me. Don't make the same things. You carry on. And I'll be here and I'll help you and I'll build you up as best as I can. But he doesn't do that. So the enemy sees his shot in how this works. And he tries to rip not only David to pieces, Saul to pieces, Jonathan to pieces, the nation of Israel to pieces. And the only thing holding this whole thing together is God going, just moving everybody to where they need to be so that they can learn that lesson. It's extremely important that you realize that as you go through difficult times, even though you have promises, that God is busy teaching you a lesson. He's putting you through things that you probably don't want to go through, and he's putting you in places you probably don't want to go. But in the midst of that, we wake up, we focus, and we say, Lord, your will be done. You with me? All right, let's go to chapter 21.
Just while the guys are getting there, another thing that stood out for me was, irrespective of whatever happened, they had covenant. And, you know, if we take a look further down in the story, how David, irrespective of what happened with Saul, kept the covenant with Jonathan, with his family as well.
Right.
And today, there's so many times we just say yes to things and we don't mean it, and we say we'll do something and we don't do it, and we, you know, it's our yeses aren't yeses anymore and our noes aren't noes anymore. Whereas there, to death, they would still stand by their covenant, whatever happened.
Right, that's a very, very good point. I mean, Messiah addresses it, let your yes be yes and your no be no. But he's talking about oaths and talking about, you know, following through in certain dynamics. Guys, if I can't trust you at your word, that's who you are. And you know, there's a reason they talk about the belt of truth, right? Because if your truth starts to slip, you get exposed. And I'm not going to believe anything else you have to say. That's where the enemy works in between the shadows. But a covenant is something, and we need to understand that from our perspective as we hold on to our covenant with God. Those promises that it talks about in Ephesians. That we were once aliens and far off, but now we have been brought near by the blood of Christ. I think it's Ephesians 2. Mm-hmm. That we are heirs to the promises of the covenants of old. And as much as we say, Father, your will be done, we're in it until the end, we need to mean it with every fiber in our being. Not when it's comfortable, not when I understand, not when things are all going my way. Father, your way. And it's not going to make a lot of sense sometimes when you go through it. But I was chatting to someone who was going through a difficult period. And my advice to them was, you know, wait. It's like, I don't understand why we're going through this. I'm like, time will give you a little bit of sight. One day you're going to turn around and you're going to look at that lesson and you're going to go, okay, I can understand why I needed to go through that. And when we're really close and when we're really in it, we don't really see what God is doing all the time. I think David is dealing with that right now. We just have to focus and we have to go, okay, Father, I might not understand it, but I trust you and I know you do everything for your good, or for your glory, for my good, and I'm going to move forward in that. Because there's an eternal plan, right? All right. Chapter 21. Your Bible might start off with the last verse in chapter 20. It says, so David got up and left, and Jonathan went back to the city. David went to see Ahimelech the Kohen in Nov. Ahimelech came trembling to meet David and asked, why are you alone? Why is no one with you? David said to Ahimelech the Kohen, the king has sent me on a mission and told me not to let anyone know its purpose or what I've been ordered to do. So I've arranged a place where the gods are to meet me. Now what do you have on hand? If you can spare 5 loaves of bread, give them to me, or whatever there is. The Kohen answered David, I don't have any regular bread, however there is consecrated bread, but only if the gods have abstained from women. David answered the Kohen, of course, women have been kept away from us, as on previous campaigns. Whenever I go out on campaign, the men's gear is clean, even if it's an ordinary trip. How much more than today, when they will be putting something consecrated in their packs? So the Kohen gave them consecrated bread, because there was no bread there other than the showbread that had been removed from before Adonai to be replaced by the freshly baked bread on the day the old bread was removed. Okay, so what do we see here? David pitches up and he goes, I'm on a secret mission. Do you have food? Now, don't you think if the king sends you on a mission, you kind of have provisions? So that should have been the first little indicator that something's not adding up. Okay, there's going to be another one a little bit later on. But you're sitting over there and he goes, all right, well, we only have the showbread, but I can't give it to you unless you tell me everybody is clean. What does that mean? What stipulations in Torah do we talk about when it comes down to the soldiers and all the rest of it about cleanliness?
They haven't been with a woman.
They haven't been with a woman. What else?
They haven't touched their body.
All right. In war, do you think that's an easy thing?
No.
What about being covered in blood? Someone else's blood.
Not so easy.
All right. What other stipulations do you think of? Why? Let me ask you. Why did God say, all right, you will not go near a woman when you're going out to battle?
Probably focus with their energy.
Okay, so you're telling me women drain your energy.
I do.
That was
Probably
easy.
focus.
Well, isn't it the same? So I'm thinking of the same link as when God said to them to abstain from coming near Him, right, at the mountain. So isn't it that the focus, because if they're going to battle for God, for war, because they're not going to war for themselves. I mean, unless our Father sends them out time and time again, we see this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the focus is on the Lord the whole time, that He's going to win the victory. So their focus can't be on what they want. Because I know there's actually a law that says if you just come and marry, then you must stay at home for that year first before going out to that.
Before you go out to war, okay? Why is that important? So you think it's just about focus?
Well, if you really need, it would just be first to, I don't know, console your household.
Console your household. Raise up an heir. Right? Okay? But why else? Matt?
This is just a guess that if the person dies in war, then it leaves that other person alone.
He leaves that other?
Person alone,
What do you mean?
in a sense, for example, if you create ties with that person, and then, for example, if the person dies in war,
Yeah?
then what happens to the tie?
Okay. What other scriptures do you think you can go to?
For which question?
The being clean. Why else? Why would God say, do not go near a woman when you come down the mountain? Or before He appeared to them on the mountain? Why would He say that?
bodily fluids, maybe.
So is it just about the bodily fluids? Let's think about it, okay? I'll say this politically correct. Is being intimate with your wife something that is holy or something that's unclean?
Unclean.
Mm.
It's kind of both, but there
It's,
are functions that are unclean.
No, remember that's in the midst of it, in the guise of marriage. Okay? It is something that is not only instructed, but something that's beautiful. The difference is that when we do this as an act of worship in fertility rites, we get confused between a marriage thing and a God thing. In the sense of, now this is how I worship. No, this is how you be fruitful and multiply. It's an instruction. Are you with me? So now you've got this dynamic when you're coming into Canaanite lands, and they will worship to get their God in a fervor. Remember, the biggest fertility rites would happen at which time?
Spring.
Spring. That's when the kings would go out to war. Okay, so it was a mixture of not only give us good crops and abundance and all the rest of it, but now we go to battle, or you're going to come with us. And God's like, listen, not only do I want you to stay focused, not only do you need to understand, and the verse I'm looking for mentions something specifically. Okay, he talks about certain things going on in the camp, and he says, because I walk in the midst of your camp when you go out. Now, if God is there in battle, do you start to understand where your camp must be clean, your heart must be clean, you're fighting, but God is there amongst you, He's with you. What are you truly focusing on? So there's a dynamic that you've got to understand here. When it comes to worship, when it comes to which victory, when it comes to a state of focus that God is the one that's going to give it, it's not an act of Canaanite worship. You see the difference? All right, so he goes in and he says that. But I want to stop there. I want you to go to Matthew 12. Because Messiah is going to have something to say about this. And it's one of these little sideline verses that we kind of just, I don't think we always catch what he's trying to say. All right? While you guys are paging there, is David permitted to eat showbread?
No,
Why not?
not your Levites.
Okay, why is it the Levites?
They were born to be the pastors of the town.
All right, let me ask you this. What is the instruction for the showbread?
For the priest. The priest.
No. Okay? I bake it and then I do what with it?
It sits in the middle.
Put it in the tabernacle for how long? 7 days, and then after the 7th day I get a new batch. Right? I take off the old batch, the new batch comes on. What do we do with the old batch?
Does the Levites eat
The Levites eat it, okay? Now, why do they get to eat it?
It's done.
Come on, guys.
It's their portion.
It's their portion. It's like the offering system, right? Remember, they don't have large tracts of land. It's food for them. Guys, you need to eat.
Also,
Good.
something interesting with that as well is the bread doesn't seem to be going stale. It's still fresh to be able to eat. And if you take a look at bread that you bake at home, okay, I'm not talking store-bought bread,
Yeah.
chicken, it's annoying. It takes a day or two until it's like rock.
Yeah.
Whereas it seems to be preserved, and it's the same as, you know, what's in the Ark of the Covenant as well. I mean, the manna was preserved, the Aaron's staff with the blossoms were preserved. Whatever was under God's watch was preserved for that period.
Right. Okay. So they actually say this in some of the rabbinic references, that it's one of the miracles of the tabernacle or the temple, that the bread was as fresh as the day it was put out. But what we see here is a Levite's food. Now remember, a Levite has to be in a state of clean or unclean when he eats the food or when he works in the tabernacle. He has to be in a state of cleanliness, right? So now what you need to see here is that this Levite doesn't have any other bread, but he has his portion. And he goes, for you, David, I'll share my food. Now, is that an act of compassion, an act of mercy, or are we now breaking Torah completely?
No, it's his portion, you can share it.
Right, listen to the argument Messiah makes in Matthew 12, reading from verse 1. On Shabbat during the time, Yeshua was walking through some wheat fields. Wheat, bread, nachon? His Talmidim were hungry, so they began picking heads of grain and eating them. Let's pause there. Is there any mitzvah that says I'm not allowed to pick a head of grain and eat it in the field?
You're not allowed to harvest.
No. Is this harvesting? No. Harvest means I get a sickle, I cut down my entire field, I snap the stalks off by using a sledge. What's the word I'm looking for? They tread it. Not like the grape press, threshing. No, the threshing floor is when they go out. First they ride over it with a sledge to separate the stalks and the heads. Then they take that and they put it on a threshing floor and then they flick it up with a winnowing fork and it separates the chaff from the head. Okay? There's a process to this. This is not just a 5-minute, look a little piece of head, I'm going to nibble on it. It's completely different. Okay? Is there any mitzvah that says this is wrong? No. These guys are gleaning. Alright? They're walking through, they're hungry. I'm going to pull off a piece and I'm going to eat what God has provided. Okay? Just like Shabbat. It is a gift. His Talmidim were hungry, so they began picking off their heads and eating them. On seeing this, the Pharisees said to them, look, your Talmidim are violating Shabbat. According to whose standard? Theirs or God's? It's a Pharisaical problem, okay? But he said to them, haven't you ever read what David did with those with him that were hungry?
I'll share his bread.
Okay? Now you would stop and you would think, okay, hang on a second, how is this the same as eating the showbread? That's not the point he's making. Listen carefully. He entered the house of God and ate the bread of the presence, which was prohibited. Now, according to Messiah, this should not have happened. Okay? Why? Because it was the Levites' portion. But the point is not whether or not it was strictly okay for him to share his food or not. Listen to the point. Both to him and to his companions, it is permitted only to the Kohanim, or haven't you read the Torah that on Shabbat, the Kohanim profane Shabbat and yet are blameless? Alright, now all of a sudden there's a change of thread. So what does he first bring in? He says, you're challenging these guys, but what about David? Are you going to challenge David too? Did he profane things? According to your stipulations, definitely. Alright? You see, he's challenging a Pharisaical understanding. The second thing is he comes in, he goes, what about the Levites? Don't they work? Are you going to tell them they're not allowed to work too? You with me? Listen to the next thing. I tell you there is a place, there is in this place something greater than the temple. Here's the crux of his statement. If you knew what I want compassion rather than sacrifice meant, you would not condemn the innocent. He's looking at them and they said, Ahituv had compassion. He fed him. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? To feed the next king of Israel. He shared his food with someone who was struggling. They didn't have food. Nail in the argument. For the Son of Man is Lord of Shabbat. What does that mean? What does it mean to be Lord of the Sabbath?
Well, if he's the creator, then
Who?
the rest.
Right. If he's the creator and he gave you Shabbat, which one's greater, Shabbat or the creator? The creator. Did the creator have compassion on everything and say, have it, they all focus on me? He did. Did he have compassion and make sure that you have food? He did. Why are there specific sacrifices where the Levites have to work on Sabbath? There are Sabbath offerings that are specific. Not just the extra ones. This is God's day. You work twice as hard. And we say, oh no, Levite, you need to put please stop making that offering right now. Because if you carry on carrying that piece and cutting and tearing and skinning and washing and all the rest of it, you are actually telling God his Sabbath means nothing. Is that the case? No. He says, what's the point? He says, God's day, God's work, God's way, and in the midst of it is love. He takes the Pharisees on. If we were to look at 1 Samuel 21, and he came up, and he comes up to Achimelech, and he goes, do you have any bread? And he goes, only the showbread, but you know, that's mine. Try a town down the road. How many of you would look at it and say, David doesn't have food? Does that sit well with you? You understand the portion? He said there's a point where we become so focused on doing what is right, we miss doing what is right. Which mitzvah does it perform? Does it go against the mitzvah? Does it become the mitzvah? Am I part of the mitzvah? Am I part of this mitzvah? Does that mitzvah contradict this mitzvah? Does this put in this thing? And all you do is you've got a guy standing in front of you asking you for a loaf of bread. Do I have extra? Does he have none? If God was standing there next to you, what do you think he would say? Feed him. What does Messiah say? If you do even to the least?
He do it unto me.
It's an interesting little parallel that we've got here. This little instance becomes part of a, listen up Pharisees, I think you missed the point. Alright?
It's just another dynamic as well to Shabbat is others given it to us as compassion. So it's his compassion to us because, I mean, in those, what I'm saying in those days, everybody worked 6 days a week, if not 7. And this was, guys, you will take the time off. And you take a look today as well, people are now being pushed to work 6-7 days a week now to try and get more out from a profitability point of view. And here I was saying, do you know what? Because I love you, because I understand you need rest, because I know how you built so that you don't stress out and get sick and then you can't provide. Take a day off if you need it. I know how your body works. I know how your mind works. I know how your feelings work. I mean, people who are stressed out and working 24/7, this whole thing 24/7 work, and we think it's such a great thing. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah. When you look at the way they gathered the Omer, for the manna,
Yeah.
God said, don't worry about it, get a double portion now, cook and bake and do whatever you want to do so that you don't have to cook and bake and gather the next day. That was God's compassion, that was God's love. Your provision is there. And here we just seemingly we get lost in it. Alright? And to just reiterate Bruce's point, remember they probably didn't have many days off as an Egyptian slave. Sabbath is a reminder that they were taken out of where? Right, the first commandment, right? I'm the Lord your God who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Fourth commandment is about Shabbat. You don't get one without the other. Okay? That's a creation thing. Alright. Okay, verse 8 in the CJB, verse 7 if in the other. One of the servants of Shaul happened to be there that day, detained before Adonai. His name was Doeg the Edomi. Right, an Edomite. Jolly good. The head of Shaul's shepherds. David said to Achimelech, perhaps you have here with you a spear or a sword. I brought neither my sword nor my other weapons because the king's mission was urgent. Alright? King sends me, I don't have food, I don't have weapons. How many of you are starting to think, hang on a minute? I mean, this guy is he a missionary? Is he a messenger? Is he a herald?
Fighter.
David? What
You know,
was he?
You send without anything, so you're.
Exactly. This is a man in the army. When he gets sent out, that's normally to fight, right? The first thing you pack is your weapons. The Kohen said, the sword of Goliath, the Philistine you killed in Elah Valley, is over here behind the ritual vest, wrapped in a cloth. If you want to take it, it's the only one here. David said, there's nothing like it, give it to me. Now, how many of you think that would be the place to stick Goliath's sword? Let's put it there by the ephod. That same day David took flight from Shaul and went to Achish, king of Gath. Okay, now help me understand this. Where did David run to the first couple of times? Who's the people that he went to go speak to try and get safe away from Saul?
Shmuel first.
We ran to Samuel,
David to Jonathan.
goes to Jonathan,
Now he's gone to
and now he's going to who? The Philistines with Goliath's sword to which town?
From Goliath.
Where Goliath came from. How desperate are you because no one in your territory can protect you?
And also he felt compelled to lie to the head Kohen as well. In saying I'm here for the king and all this and that, and none of it was.
Maybe because of the king, but not
Yeah.
necessarily here for the king. You know, it's a crazy dynamic. I just want you guys to take some time to feel what David is feeling.
And the other thing there as well, if you take a look, Joab was there, so he was probably checking what was happening. He was going to run to the king and basically ask for.
Yeah, watching you, watching me, hoping how much do you know, how much don't you know. He's a shepherd, so he's out in the fields. Okay, let's see what's going on. Another dynamic we should probably take the time to acknowledge is the fact that we have an Edomite underneath the king of Israel. Tells you what? What did he say? The older will serve the younger, right? And every time they have been lifted up and every time they're close to God, the Edomites will be underneath them. But every time Israel throw off the kingdom of heaven yoke, the Edomites come up and they become a problem. Okay? So Doeg underneath is telling us that God is still in control here. That same day David took flight from Shaul and went to Achish, king of Gath. The servants of Achish said to them, isn't this David king of the land? Weren't they dancing, singing to each other? Shaul has killed these thousands and David tens of thousands. Now where were they singing that? Not on the battlefield. When they came back from the battlefield, they were singing that in their territory. David's fame has spread right through even now to the Philistines. So I think what was going on is he thought, well, okay, maybe they'll think I'm a defector. Maybe they won't recognize me. I'm just going to try and blend in. I'm going to hide a little bit. Maybe I'll pretend to just kind of blend in here as a traveler or something. I don't know. But when he hears them saying, isn't that David who killed tens of thousands? Isn't he the guy who came across, he's across the land over there? This is the head of the army. What is he doing here? These remarks were not lost on David. It's a nice way of saying, okay, they know who I am. And he became very much afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. So as they were watching, he changed his behavior and acted like a madman. When they had hold of him, scratching marks on the doors of the city gate, drooling down his beard. Alright, so this is not David being dead sneaky. He's like, isn't that David? And then he starts twitching and growling and doing all types of funny things because he realizes that he cannot fight off this whole army with the couple of guys that he has. He's in trouble. If Saul was not going to kill him, these guys definitely will. So, in his panic, things acting crazy will work. Achish says to his servants, yeah, you see that this man is Meshuggah. What do you guys have in your translation? Because it's not Meshuggah. He's a madman. Meshuggah is, yeah, it's a good Jewish word. He's crazy. All right? Why bring him to me? Why do I want to do this? Am I short of Meshuganim? In his time, I've got lots of crazy. I don't want another one. Says, is that why you've brought this one to go crazy on me? Must I have this in my house? And he's like thinking, all right, you guys, I'm done. Let's just deal with that.
Before you go to the next chapter.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so when I was going through this, sorry, 21 is like a long and I saw quite a bit there.
Mm-hmm.
So this thing where, wait, Doeg, yeah. The Edomite, when he was being detained there, because detained is when you keep him somewhat, like, and that's they've done a crime or whatever. But this Moab, it's a Levitical city. I couldn't find that it was a refuge city, but could it be that maybe he went there also because maybe he also did something? I was also trying to find that he did something.
What do I?
Yeah.
No, I think the midst of it is that God kept him there because he's going to set up the next part.
Okay.
Right? So in the sense of, I still need to teach David that I'm going to protect him. He doesn't have to run to the Philistine. Okay? David thinks that God can't protect him. He ran to Samuel. No one stopped him except now that we have prophesying, we have all of this. But he sat there at my feet. How much closer do you want to get? I go to Jonathan. Jonathan, please talk to him. You spoke to him last time. He made an oath to Adonai. He said he wasn't going to kill me. And Jonathan's like, what do you mean? I haven't heard anything about this. No, he's going to kill you. Okay, I'll find out. Where else can I go? And in the midst of it, I think it's just what I think is that God is busy trying to teach him, because where are we going to find David in the next couple of chapters? Running around the wilderness of Judea. And that's where God's going to preserve him. Okay? Not in a Philistine camp where another God can keep him safe. Idea? Right? But there's going to be dynamics where I think he's going to see time and time again that God's going to come through. Yes, again, he's going to pull a fast one later, and he's going to stay in Ziklag, which is also slightly Philistine territory. And he's actually going to do a lot of damage to Israel's enemies while he's there pretending to be raiding for the Philistine. But I think there's a lesson that he needs to see. Okay? I want you quickly to go to Psalm 34.
Just something interesting as well is, if you take a look with the wilderness, we always think that's the bad place to be because you haven't got provisions there, but that's where God looks after you. So, I mean, David was looked after in the wilderness. We know the Israelites were in the wilderness when they were taken out. And we see in Revelation that the people are going to be in the wilderness and God's going to preserve the remnant there.
And they're from who need to flee from Israel.
Yeah. And it's just interesting that often in the wilderness that's where God is. And we think that's the lowest point for us.
I think it's like when we chat about when we went to Mizpah, right? Every great man of God spends some time in the wilderness. Right? They go into a place of much, and then let me say it this way. God is a master of taking you from where he found you to where you need to be. And a lot of that time he's going to take you into places where you cannot survive by yourself. You ever been through one of those moments? Financially you're struggling, health-wise you're struggling, mentally you're struggling, spiritually you're struggling, and yet, every day is like a manna type of day. How did I get through today, Lord? One step at a time. And when you get to Shabbat, you collapse at his feet and he goes, Father, I don't even know how we got through this week. He goes, I got you through. And I don't know about you, but we had many of those times where we walked in and it was like a little family joke is, we survived another week. It's almost like the week was out to kill you, and somehow by the grace of God you're sitting at his feet and you're going, you did it again. They did whatever they could to try and get rid of me, but here we are. And the peace of Shabbat, and you get focused on God, and you take a big breath and you go, another week. There are those moments, in those wilderness moments. There's a point in Torah where Moses turns around, he talks about the awesome wilderness. Now that's not because it was vast, because that's where God met his people on such an intimate level. And you know, we have promised land moments where you're going to get into it, but it might not be all the, you know, the promised land a lot of us think of as like eternity in heaven, right? You have a calling on your life, a fullness in that calling, the fullness of maturity. That is your promise. That is part of your calling, and it is something that you have to walk to. You have to get there. And each step is a way of following God and saying, okay, Abba, I don't know where I'm going, show me. Pillar of fire at night, cloud by day, one step at a time. That's how I'm going to get there. And each step he's going to reveal himself to me. And in the midst of my journey, I become seasoned in him, focused in him. And he becomes more real to you than the reality you left behind. How many of you have walked through a period in your life where God was tangible? And he was like, okay. Think of the man Moses was at the burning bush, making excuses, and the man that came back to Sinai at the end of it. He wasn't questioning, who are you again?
He was reminding him.
He was firm, he was there, he was having intimate conversations with God to the point where he starts to glow. There are moments in your life where you need to take those steps, one step at a time, to get to your next place. There are stages, and many of them are in the wilderness. Okay? Are you guys in Psalm 34? Now, what do you see at the top there?
Psalm of David regarding the time he pretended to be insane in front of Abimelech, who sent him away.
Right. So this was such a big moment, and it's covered in a couple of verses, that David actually pens out a hymnal. He actually writes a song. So I thought we'd take the time just to read through it. It says, I will bless Adonai at all times. His praise will always be in my mouth. When I boast, it will be about Adonai. The humble will hear of it and be glad. Proclaim with me the greatness of Adonai. Let us exalt his name together. I sought Adonai and he answered me. He rescued me from everything I feared. They looked to him and grew radiant. Their faces will never blush for shame. This poor man cried. Adonai heard and saved him from all his troubles. Can you imagine what he must have been feeling? The angel of Adonai who encamps around those who fear him delivers him. Taste and see that Adonai is good. How blessed are those who take refuge in him. Fear Adonai, you holy ones of his, for those who fear him lack nothing. Young lions can be needy, they can go hungry, but those who seek Adonai lack nothing good. Come children, listen to me. I will teach you to fear Adonai. Which of you takes pleasure in living? Who wants a long life to see good things? If you do, keep your tongue from evil and your lips from deceiving talk. Turn from evil and do good. Seek peace and go after it. The eyes of Adonai watch over the righteous, and his ears are open to their cry. But the face of Adonai opposes those who do evil, to cut off all memory of them from the earth. The righteous cried out, and Adonai heard, and he saved them from all their troubles. Adonai is near those with broken hearts. He saves those whose spirit is crushed. You can really hear where David is, right? The righteous person suffers many evils, but Adonai rescues him out of them all. He protects all his bones, not one of them gets broken. Who does that sound like? Yeshua. Evil will kill the wicked, and those who hate the righteous will be condemned. But Adonai redeems his servants. No one who takes refuge in him will be condemned.
You know that thing, that verse 19, Adonai is near those with broken hearts,
Mm-hmm.
and saves those whose spirits is crushed. There's like so much deeper, like, I know this sounds totally upside down and weird, but I guess that's how Abba works. His kingdom is upside down, it's not how the world says. So when you're going through something, like, and I'm speaking for myself, like always when I've gone through stuff, when I'm at my weakest or my lowest, that there is because God is, you feel Him more and you experience Him so much more when you're not comfortable and you're not happy. Well, I'm not saying you mustn't be happy, but when you're not
Why?
in your comfort.
Why?
Because you can hear Him louder.
Why?
Because you are humbled, you're humbled at your Father's feet and you want to seek His help through what you're going through.
Why?
And you surrendered your life and you've
Why?
given up
You're
everything.
in the wilderness.
And that,
No, there's a simple reality here. It's because you've come to the end of you.
no, in Himself.
You plod along quite happily when you can do it yourself. When you can't, that's when you actually care what other has to say. It shouldn't be like that. Your ears should be open all the time. But we get to a place where we think, okay, I'll just do what I need to do today. And then by the time it's done, I've done what I wanted, but I haven't done what He wanted. Now, it might be the same thing, but the focus is completely different. God wants you to get up and go to work and do your job well. Are you doing it for His glory or are you doing it for yours? Is that what we say when we get up? Or do we just go and do our thing and then when we get stuck and then we go, Father, please help us? We just need to catch ourselves from time to time. Alright, chapter 22. David left there and took refuge in the cave of Adullam. When his brothers and the rest of his father's family heard of it, they went down to see him there. Then all the people in distress, in debt and embittered, began gathering around him, and he became their leader. There were about 400 with him. All right, so David's family now are running to him, compared to, what do you want here? Remember that David and Goliath moment? Just before that, oh, you came here, you little snot bag, you came here to spy out and do whatever you want. They didn't say very nice things to him, did he? And now, they're running. And I want to just take a moment. All of those who are in distress and in debt or embittered, the desperate and the broke, run to David. Why?
Isn't it because he's a military leader, and if I go and I go fight, I'm going to be paid for it, or I'm going to have some purpose in my life again? Isn't that the reason?
Is it a reality? Him and a band of, with all of the people that pitched up of 400. How many men did we have in Israel again on the last sort of censuses? Do you remember from Torah? Roughly about 600,000 men versus 400. What type of army are we going to deal with here? How many of them are trained? The ones that are in debt and those who are struggling. What does that tell you about David? Not tell you about them.
He trusts in God and not in them.
David is a refuge to those who are desperate and struggling.
I was going to say, he's like Yeshua, he accepts the tax collectors and the sinners.
He said, come, I will look after you. He never called for them. He didn't say anybody wants to defect from me because of taxes and Saul and, well, if you don't have any money, that's the type of people we want. Come. It's a really weird drive, but they go to him because of the type of man he is. Why didn't they go to their king?
Because he's great.
Because he's not a refuge for them. So you start to develop, or you start to see David's character shining through. That people are starting to see it. Okay?
There's two things as well. If you take a look, now his brothers have come to him, which without saying it, Saul's probably looking for his family now to look for him.
Yeah.
So there could be something there as well. But also, if you take a look at the 400, you write that back through to Gideon as well. Gideon.
How many were Gideon?
It was 300 and something eventually.
Yeah.
But even there, it was like the riffraff that eventually.
A much smaller group to do
Yeah.
a great victory, yeah. Okay? So, let's see what happens in verse 3. David went from there to Mizpah of Moab and said to the king of Moab, please let my father and mother come and stay here with you until I know what God will do for me. All right? So we didn't really work out to the Philistines, so now we're going to go to the Moabites, and I'm going to give you my parents. David, what are you thinking? Tell me, Dim, what is David thinking? Who was David's great-grandmother? Where did she come from? Ah. We've got family. All right? Great granny was a Moabite. Even though there was that complete, in Ruth 2, in my opinion, this complete, your God will be my God, your people will be my people, I'll follow you wherever you go, right? That, for me, it's a discipleship cry. It's everything that a disciple should sort of, I think, in a sense.
Are we all reading those? Just sort of like.
Maybe for what? Oh,
I'm not Naomi.
I was.
Right.
Sorry.
Okay? We're going through the process. You all are welcome to join just as long as God says it's fine. If He doesn't, sorry for you. Okay? So he goes back to family and he goes, all right, at least we have some sort of lineage there. You will be protected. He presented them to the king of Moab, and they lived with him as long as David remained in his stronghold. But the prophet of God said to David, don't stay in your stronghold, leave, going to the land of Yehudah. So David left and went to the forest of Cherith. So prophets are being sent to David. David, God says. What does that tell David? God loves you, I'm still with you, I will protect you. Okay? Shaul heard that David and the men with him had been located. What does that tell you about Shaul? There's spies in the land. He's got people. Right? Shaul was sitting in Gibeah underneath a tamarisk tree on the hill with a spear in his hand. That infamous spear. And all his servants standing around him. I would be a nervous servant. Okay? Why is he sitting underneath a tree? Because it's hot. Okay. Thank you, Captain Obvious. Huh? That he's tired. Alright, remember we see that time and time again in Judges 4 verse 5. We see Deborah sitting underneath a tree. Okay, it was Deborah's poem. Before, in 1 Samuel 14, we saw King Saul sitting underneath a pomegranate tree. Okay, it's sort of like a judge thing to do. Okay, it's interesting that Deborah sat underneath a palm, because a palm symbolizes what?
Righteousness.
Righteousness. Before, in the beginning, we see King Saul sitting underneath a pomegranate, which talks about life and abundance, the priesthood. And now he's sitting underneath a tamarisk tree. Now you start to ask the right questions.
But now isn't under that which God had promised Abraham.
Is that the same tree?
Maybe.
I don't know. You have to go and look. Ask the question. Why specifically this tree? Because it's funny. You might get your answer many chapters later of what this represents. But you can go chase it down where it says a tamarisk tree. Shaul said to his servants standing around him, listen, you men of Benjamin. Right, so now it's about Benjamin and not about Israel. Is Jesse's son going to give you any of you fields and vineyards? Is he going to make all you commanders of thousands and hundreds? So he's asking them, is this what he's going to give you? Is this why you have conspired against me? Why none of you told me when my son went in league with Jesse's son? None of you is concerned about me. Otherwise, you would have told me that my son had incited my servant to become my enemy. as he is now. Two things you need to notice here. Does he refer to him as David?
No.
Always Jesse's son, right? Not the beloved. Okay? Why does he say to these people who are standing witness that he says, incited my servant to become my enemy? Why does he refer to him as a servant? Right, to show that he is still king. Not refer to the next king of Israel, but something that's underneath him. Then Doeg, the Edomi, who had been put in charge of Shaul's servants, answered, I saw Yishai's son come to Nov, to Achimelech, the son of Achituv. He consulted Adonai for him. Did that happen? Did David say, inquire of God for me? No. So why is he saying that? Why does he think that?
Could be because the sword was by the ephod.
Right, so he saw him go in and then he saw him go back inside, and then he took a bit of time and then he came out with a sword where they know that's where it was kept. So maybe he thinks it was cloak and dagger. We're not exactly sure. The Hebrew here a little later can be rendered in two ways. He consulted Adonai for him, gave him food, and gave him the sword of Goliath the Philistine. The king sent to summon Achimelech the Kohen, the son of Achituv, along with all his father's family, the Kohanim and Nov. And all of them went to the king. Shaul said, listen here, you son of Achituv. He answered, here I am, my lord. Shaul said to him, why did you conspire against me, you and Jesse's son? By giving him bread and a sword and consulting Adonai for him, you helped him rebel against me and become my enemy, which he now is. Now, isn't that exactly the seed of rebellion? You gave him a sword, one guy. You gave him a sword, you gave him bread, and you consulted God. That is complete treason.
Yes, because I think
Is
we
it?
could fight without all of that.
You know, 600,000 people under your command. You're worried about stomach and some bread and one sword. And you're going, you spoke, you asked, you interceded for him. It's a priest's job to discuss things of God. Anybody ask you? But we could probably see that as this way. If he is rendering an account and he inquired of God for him, he's saying, only the king has that authority. So it's kind of a really roundabout statement. Achimelech answered the king, is there anyone among all of your servants more trustworthy than David? Oh, here we go. Well, that guy, he's amazing. He serves you with all of his heart. He's the king's son-in-law. Never mind that. He carries out your every request. Your household honors him. I didn't consult God for him just today. Heaven forbid. Okay? So the way this can be rendered in Hebrew is, did I begin now to inquire of God for him? Far be it from me. So he's saying, I never inquired of God for him. Okay? So now you have an interesting debacle. What happens if I bring forward people and I have one witness being contradicted with another witness?
So my translation is different. It says, this is not the first, so this was certainly not the first time I had consulted God for him.
Yeah, like I said, it's a double-edged statement. So one section you could say, he can go out and he would do that, but that should have been mentioned when he went to go fetch Goliath's sword. It never is. So I think the other rendition is probably more correct. Okay.
But then, so with the two coming back to the witnesses, but then you can't do anything against them.
Absolutely. If we do not have a full statement, never mind this is not exactly outright treason or rebellion, but listen to Shaul's response. The king shouldn't accuse me or my father's family of anything. Your servant knows nothing at all about any of this. But the king said, you must die, you and your father's whole family.
That's revenge. That's not.
It's not in line with Torah. We're dealing with Kohanim here. There is no fear of God anymore. Are you seeing a decline? It's getting bad. It's going quickly. Yeah.
I was going to say that. So the town that the Kohanim was in,
Yeah.
Nov, comes from a root that means fruit.
Okay.
And it got me thinking about, so you've got the priest there, you've got Doeg there, and now they're both in the tabernacle, but we can measure by their fruit what kind of tree that they are. And we see, even though this guy, Ahimelech, is giving such good answers, David is the most trustworthy guy, he's the king's son-in-law, all these things. Even if there was something, again, that David had actually done wrong, but Ahimelech's fruit shows that he's a good tree.
Yes.
Whereas the Edomite's fruit doesn't, and King
Good.
Saul's fruit. And I was just tying it back to this
Very
lesson.
nice.
Just another one as well. If we take a look at the previous chapter, when we mentioned that David was lying to the priest. But if David knew that his name Doeg was spying, he actually then was giving the priest a way out, because the priest could honestly stand before Saul if he was called in, like he has now, to say, well, we didn't know about it. We didn't know he was here for you. So it's quite interesting, because if you take it back to the previous one that Billy did, the lying that happened there as well was to save a life. And David potentially in the previous chapter lied to save the Cohen's life, although it wasn't immediate, because then he could have had deniability or plausibility.
Very nice.
So it's
Nice links.
time there.
Then the king told the guards standing around him, go around and kill the Kohanim of Adonai, because they are siding with David and because they knew he was escaping. So which group of people is he talking to? Tribe?
Benjamites.
Benjamites. Right. This is what's going to happen. I accuse you of treason. You let David escape. You're siding with Jonathan and David. Now show your loyalty. Yes, they didn't tell me, but the king's servant refused to lift their hands against the Kohanim of Adonai. So the king said to Doeg, you go around and kill the Kohanim. Well, if I can't get the Benjamites to do it, I'm going to get an Edomite. He's got no reverence for God, no reverence for Kohanim. He's just going to go do what he wants to. Isn't it kind of interesting, the same way we kind of get Yeshua betrayed into the Roman authorities' hands? People reckoned him as a prophet. People reckoned him, he could be the Messiah. They couldn't find any fault with him, but the Romans, well, what do the Romans care about our God, about our Messiah, about our prophets? It doesn't matter to them. Kind of see that same sort of, if you want someone to desecrate things that are holy, it's someone who doesn't believe that there is anything holy. Okay? Doeg the Edomite went around and fell on the Kohanim. That day he killed 85 persons wearing linen ritual vests. He also attacked Nob, the city of the Kohanim, with a sword. He put to the sword both men, women, children, babies, cattle, donkeys, and sheep. This guy didn't stop at the men, at the priests. He went and he tried to annihilate everything. Now we can stop and we can go, right, how can this be allowed? But I want you to see that the enemy will use any opportunity to go against the anointed of God. If you can't take out David, I'm going to do the next best thing. I will use whatever opportunity to tear this place apart.
And also, the destruction that was supposed to happen to the Amalekites, kill everyone, leave nothing alive, is ending up happening to a priestly city because of Saul's rage. You see that? That's terrible.
Yeah. One of the sons of Ahimelech, the son of Achituf, named Aviatar, escaped and fled to join David. So what do we see? Now even the priests are going to start defecting. They're not even safe in their own land. Aviatar told David that Shaul had killed the Kohanim of Adonai. David said to Aviatar, I knew it. That day when Doeg the Edomite was there, I knew he would tell Shaul, I caused the death of every person in your father's family. Now this is, again, we can take it back to what Bruce has said, he tried to manipulate the truth a little bit so that he wouldn't get into trouble, but he just kept on bugging him, Doeg. But what I want you to see here is that we see David taking accountability. He could have said, that Edomite, don't worry, we're going to get him. Saul's going to get it, we're going to get him. It's all their fault. But David always points back to where he was and where he is. There's something about a good leader that just says, this happened underneath my watch. We hold ourselves responsible. You can blame anybody and everybody, guys. In fact, it's very easy to. And you can also just go, oh, well, it's their fault. They should have done that. They should have done that. That's the reason why this is like that. But if it happens under, let's say, our congregation, leadership's job is to go, that was on us. That might be your sin. But we have to go, could we have prevented this? We stand up and we go, Father, this is underneath my banner. Your banner, but I'm responsible for your flock, Lord. So, when you are standing over people, as much as everyone has to make a conscious decision to walk with God and make the choices, it's those who have been lifted up into leadership that ultimately will stand accountable. Just like everybody else will, but for us more so. The reason it is because we don't want to shift responsibility. Accountability is something we all need to understand. Immature people, it was the dog's fault. It was this fault. And we justify our sin and our responses. More mature people, could we have prevented this? What can we learn from this? And how do we stop this in future? Responsibility. You with me? Okay. I knew who would tell Shaul. Okay, sorry, I read that. Verse 23. Stay with me, don't be afraid, because the one who is seeking my life seeks yours too. You'll be safe with me. And again, we see David, even in the midst of this difficult situation, says, stay here, I'll do whatever I can to protect you. Okay? Again, David becomes a refuge, this time to Kohanim. Alright? Any questions, any thoughts, any extras?
I have the question because I was looking at this, but it's come up quite a bit actually in terms of the showbread. So Leviticus 2, the whole of Leviticus 2, except for verse 11, tells you that any grain offering is made without yeast. I know that the scripture doesn't tell you, like Leviticus 24 doesn't say without yeast, it just says made with fine flour. So could it be possible that that bread would have been bread without yeast?
As far as I can remember, yes. I think the reality of the only one strictly commanded was the bread for Shavuot.
Yeah.
That has to become leavened. Right.
Okay.
But it doesn't really mention either way. So
Yes,
it's some people thinks, yeah, you can go check up different references, the Temple Institute and those places. There are differing opinions on it. Okay, sorry, Bruce.
Just on that as well, in Matthew, if you take a look, when Yeshua is walking through the fields, if it was wheat, that would have been between Passover and Shavuot as well.
Shavuot harvest time.
So, I'm not saying, but timing, if it was, it could have been.
Yeah, but we're talking about 2 loaves versus how many loaves of the showbread?
12.
12, right? One for each one of the tribes.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm going to pull this through to my job. And as much as you put rules out there to protect people and to try to avoid things that go wrong, it still goes wrong. How can you then still turn around and say, what could I have done more?
Well, you have to obviously take stock. Look what David does. He goes, I knew it when I saw him there. I knew it. Could David have done something different? Probably.
No.
He couldn't have gone and
He couldn't
taken
be part of
Doeg
the
and
servants
gagged him and
going
tied him up and taken him away? Could he have done that?
Yeah, okay.
He could have. Right.
He
So
had no reason to do that.
Right, so what he did was he tried to do something. Don't you think that the priest would have thought, oh, that's a little weird? Right, he's on the king's errand. He's taking on the king's shepherd servant guy. He's got no bread, he's got no sword, but he's gagging him and dragging him with. I don't understand what's going on here. Right, it probably would have given away what he was trying to achieve. Okay, but he probably could have done something differently. Hindsight is a wonderful, it's a wonderful tool to be able to look back at the way we did things before and can we improve on them. Okay, so when I talk about accountability, obviously I can't be accountable if you sin, right? That is your responsibility between you and God. Could I have said anything to help you if I knew there was a problem in your life? Yes, maybe I didn't counsel you, maybe I didn't meet you at your need, maybe you were really struggling with something and you tried to phone me 13 times and I ignored you because I was tired. Whose can I go, oh well, it's Rebecca Ann's story. I told her not to do that like 4 years ago, so why didn't she listen then? The reality is, can I meet you at your need?
Can I do more?
Can I? And sometimes you're going to get to people that are just going to be bent on their own destruction. You cannot beat someone into the kingdom, and you cannot beat them, well, I suppose you can. You know, you Bible bash people to the point where you say you have to be, you have to be, you have to be, but what is going to be the fruit thereafter? They're going to be there, but there's going to be no love, no desire, and no heart to be. Why are you here? You're not here to listen to me. You're here to learn about God. That's the ultimate. Okay? It's got nothing to do with anything else. But if I force you to be here, I'm taking away that response. Because you're here not to listen to God, you're here because you told me to sit here.
I've had success with captive audiences before.
There's a difference between training up a child and helping an adult understand the fullness of where they are. But also at the same time, when you're dealing with children, not to try and beat it into them with repetition the whole time, because eventually, we've all heard the term the pastor's kid. And we normally know what happens when you are the pastor's kid.
Can't hear it anymore.
Because the guys get to a place where they're like, well, I've heard it all. I've seen it before. I'm out. I'm done. What more can you give me? There's no relationship with God. But if you teach them about relationship instead of teaching them about rules, the rules will follow with the right heart condition. That's very difficult to bring across. So when I talk about accountability and responsibility, I'm simply saying don't shirk your accountability when it comes to a group environment. Okay? How we handle it could be the difference between helping someone or beating someone, watching them fall. Could I have been there? And we have to stop and we have to go, okay, did I know about this? Did I think this was going to happen? Was there any inkling that this was the case? And if you can say, no, I had no clue, I can't believe this happened, this is genuine a surprise to me, then, okay, maybe I need to learn to pay more attention. Or it's a case where these people are just bent on doing whatever they want to do. Okay, you with me? So, like I said, I shared with this to you guys before. I think it was, I don't know if you guys have heard of Mayor Giuliani. Okay, he was like this famous mayor, I think mayor of New York, right? And this guy won like Mayor of the Year for like, I don't know, like 4 times or something, worldwide. And they've taken every single guy and they've pinned him up and he's come out tops a few times in his tenure as Mayor of New York. And he had a little statement on his table that the guy mentioned once, is that when you walked into his office, it didn't just say his name, it said, I'm responsible. If it was happening in his city, he is the ultimate, he's the head, I'm responsible. So he could have kicked it down, he could have pulled oaks, he could have told guys, you're doing a horrible job, all the rest of it. No one is really caring who is the guy who's in charge of sewage. They care that the mayor is not doing anything about it. And he could have said, but I told him to do that. I told him, I sent him the issue. Or I didn't even know about it. Now I know about it. Now I'm going to do it. Ultimately, he took accountability. And he went, I'm responsible. So if there's anything that comes up to me, what am I going to do about it? And this is what I'm trying to get across.
So I just want to say, because you can think you've covered it all you dotted your I's and crossed your T's, but children will find anyway.
You're gonna learn. I mean, if anybody comes up here, your principal, right? If they come up here and anything is going on, you can look at your teacher and you go, why are you not watching it? The parent's gonna come to the principal and gonna go,
What are you doing about it?
so is this your school?
Yeah.
And you have to go, yes, but I'm gonna sort that. Okay? With your own walk, you take accountability. With your family, you take accountability. With your fellowship, you take accountability. In the kingdom of heaven, this is the dynamic in which you need to hold on to. Don't shirk it and say, oh, well, they're up to no good, then I'm going to ignore it. Ignoring that becomes a later problem for someone else. And it might become a later problem for you. And then someone's going to go, but you saw that. Why did you ignore them? You guys with me? Is that more clear? All right. Okay. Anything else?
Just I found it interesting that again there's a 5 that pops up. So 5 stones he picked up,
Yeah.
even though he only used one to, throw Goliath down.
Yeah.
Yeah, he asks, he doesn't go, can I just have a bread? He goes, can I have 5 or whatever you have? He specifically chooses 5 again. So that was interesting for me, obviously.
Torah.
the whole time.
Yeah.
So,
Okay.
At least awesome, just chase that down with the people Yeshua fed.
Yes,
So
I
it's-
know the 5,000 people is 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish.
And then, so if you take 5 loaves from 12, you get 7 left. You also get that 12 for Israel and 7 for the nations thing with the baskets, yeah.
All right. Okay. Shall we stand? Father, we just want to thank you again for your word. Father, I just pray that you would make sense of it, Father. I know if it comes from me, it's just words, Father, but with you, it's life-changing. So, Father, if I pray that anything that has come from me, out of my mouth that is off me, Father, I pray that you nullify it, but I pray that you would just continue to invest your word in us, Father, water it, help it grow so that it continues to bear good fruit. Father, I thank you for this time. I thank you for this family. Father, I just thank you that you continue again to go out before us and come in behind us. And we just give you glory. In Yeshua's name we pray. Amen.